Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Um, Firstly, let me thank Dr. Anirban Ganguly for inviting me today to speak here. I think it's a very timely topic, considering that our Prime Minister's visit is going to take place in the next couple of weeks. And I think so many changes have taken place in China that we need to take note of. I'll give an overview, since the topic is current developments in Tibet and China and implications for India. I'll give an overview of the changes that have taken place in China, and I will build into the narrative the implications for us and wind up with Tibet, the developments there, and how that will impact on us. And in the process, I will try and hint at the vulnerabilities that exist in China, and which could, of course, if properly viewed, offer opportunities. At the outset, let me say that the new leadership that was installed in China at the 18th Party Congress, which was a very important Congress last November, was actually saw a very smooth transition of power. When I say smooth transition, there is, I think, enough evidence to point to the fact that Xi Jinping, who is now the Supremo in China, combining the posts of President of China, the General Secretary of the party, and the Chairman of the Military Commission, worked in very close coordination with Hu Jintao, his predecessor, for at least 2 years, if not more. And I say that because the indicators are visible. And let me name a few. One, he was very quick off the mark after taking over, exhibiting a pronounced self-confidence, and began assembling a brains trust of his own. He moved much faster than his predecessors. Secondly, he appointed the party secretary of Beijing was appointed months before the 18th Party Congress took place. In other words, before Xi Jinping assumed full power. And the post of Party Secretary of Beijing is normally held by a confidant of the Chinese Communist Party chief. So that was a significant pointer. Particularly, the man who was chosen was in fact close to retirement and a Central Committee member, which is very unusual. Of course, he did get his promotion and he is still in the saddle. Another point was the appointment by Xi Jinping of the head of his general office in the Military Commission, which is a key slot considering that he is the only civilian in the Military Commission. And the head of that, Chen Shucher, whom he appointed, has been Hu Jintao's secretary for over 25 years, in charge of Hu Jintao's personal office. That does show a closeness between the two and a certain sense of confidence. There are some other indicators, particularly in the military field, where we find that the heads of the major departments in the PLA, as well as the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, were all appointed and announced before the 18th Party Congress. Very unusual indeed, because they're supposed to be under the charge of the 18th Party Congress. The Congress was unusual in many respects, and certain things were quite noticeable. Firstly, it was to select a new generation of leaders who for the first time had not been selected or chosen or identified by the veteran cadres or former long marchers. In fact, Hu Jintao represented the last of those people. So Xi Jinping, to that extent, was new on the field. Secondly, in the run-up to the 18th Party Congress, we saw a new kind of politics in China, which many of us who've been watching the scene for quite many years haven't seen. We saw, I would say, almost a Western style of campaigning going on there. Of course, with their own differences, shall I say with Chinese characteristics, where people who were party secretaries or people who were contenders for the post of Politburo or in the Politburo Standing Committee began openly taking positions on certain issues in order to attract the attention of their elders. This was something new. And we also noticed for the first time the usually reclusive and low-key, but very powerful, children of old veteran cadres called the princelings, or I would prefer the term red descendants, because not all of them were children of very high-ranking cadres, came out and took positions on public issues, took positions on key issues at public gatherings in Beijing. And for the first time we saw an assembly of such people, and they raised what the Chinese call life and death issues for the party. They spoke about the extent of corruption that had weakened the party. They spoke about the laxity of party discipline, and in fact some of them wondered where the party was headed, whether it would continue to remain a ruling party. And some pointed to the extent of, in the manner in which the disease of ostentation and a lavish lifestyle had spread throughout the party. And in fact, one of them pointed out that the amount of money spent on banquets and purchase of luxury limousines by party cadres exceeded even the national defense budget in a particular year. So these were strong comments made by them, and they included people like the son of the former party propaganda chief, the son of a former president of China, and Xi Jinping, that is the present chief's sister, elder sister. So it was fairly strong comments by these people, which of course he noted. In this backdrop, there were two other things that happened. One, there was a spread of pro-Mao sentiment, or what some call a Mao nostalgia. It happens here too. I'm sure many of you have come across people who say that in the British days things were good. Rice was so much cheaper and wheat was so much cheaper, etc. They forget, of course, the bad things. That's what is happening there. From a classless society, when there was this transition, when they began seeing people who were rich and not so rich, and some very poor, this kind of sentiment does spread, and that is what began happening and is happening in China. There was, of course, a tolerance, an inbuilt tolerance, which continues till today, for the left-wing or ultra-left websites. They continue to post their things. But, as I mentioned earlier, there was a new kind of campaigning, and some of these people, some of the aspirants, began tapping into these sentiments. The foremost among them was Po Xilai, and you would have all heard about the Po Xilai incident and the manner in which he has now been, of course, sentenced. But he tapped this sentiment, and he began building up his popular power base in order to see that he makes it to the Politburo Standing Committee, thereby becoming one of the 7 grand men who rule China. He failed in his attempt because it was perceived as a challenge to the party center. But in the process, what happened was he gave a severe jolt to the Chinese Communist Party leadership, which realized that they had been very lax in matters of inner party discipline, that even the party nomenclatura, who were the high-ranking elements in the party cadre, had begun hobnobbing with foreigners and begun being suborned by foreign intelligence organizations, as was Po Xilai's chief of police, who tried to seek asylum in the US consulate in Chengdu. So there was a crackdown. This also led to, and here Tibet does come in, this led to a suspicion all around in the Communist Party, a suspicion about minorities, doubts about their loyalties. And we saw this reflected in the fact that there was not a single Tibetan in the PLA delegation that went to the 18th Party Congress. And the Tibetan representation in the Central Committee was reduced to 1 person. Things like that. But the reaction to all this was that the party closed ranks and decided that they would opt for loyal, doctrinaire cadres who would stick to party discipline and adhere to the party line. In other words, the chances of reformers getting in was brought to naught, and they picked up these what I would call stodgy, tough characters into the Politburo Standing Committee. Let me mention a few of them. First, because that will have an impact on Chinese policy. We have Yu Changshan, who is the head of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, which is also the body that interacts and oversees minorities-related issues, as well as non-Communist Party issues. Chang Kao-li is the Executive Vice Premier, hardliner, believes in big business. In other words, he's going to favor state-owned enterprises and probably try and go slow on the reform. And Wang Qishan, who's known as a stern administrator, who has been brought in to head the Central Discipline Inspection Commission. In other words, to help Xi Jinping in his crackdown on corruption. But while all this is happening, they've also retained Liu Yunsha, who was the party propaganda chief, a hardliner, and he continues to look after propaganda apparatus in the Politburo Standing Committee. We will come to him later. As if to push the point that party discipline is of extreme importance and that the party ideological line is of extreme importance, Xi Jinping has been referring to Maoist doctrines and quoting from Mao ever since he took over. And over the last month, we've seen that a mass line has started, a new program or a new campaign has started in China. And by yesterday, all provinces, all state-owned enterprises, and all major departments and units had initiated the campaign and come out saying that the party center's directives must be obeyed, all party cadres must speak with a unified voice, and there should be no differences in opinion. So that kind of campaign has started. And for those of us who've been looking at things for many years, Xi Jinping has also initiated a criticism and self-criticism session in all these provinces, where the party secretaries, the governors, all participate. And Xi Jinping, in fact, day before yesterday, has asked them to be even more candid or frank in their criticism and self-criticism, and not just be formal about the whole thing. There is, of course, speculation among certain analysts whether this is a prelude to the old 100 Flowers campaign, but that's, I mentioned that in a very light-hearted way. But this is what is happening. So, what are the characteristics of the new leaders? And I think that's important for us because that molds the minds of the people, as you all know. There are a couple of things I'd like to mention here. Firstly, the entire top leadership of the Chinese Communist Party today, and particularly the Politburo Standing Committee, are people who have grown up during the Cultural Revolution years. That means they have grown up in difficult times. They have joined the party during the Cultural Revolution period. So they've been through that, I would say, real red phase. Many of them have suffered personally or seen their family members suffer, be tortured or die, and yet they join the party. That indicates a certain toughness, molding of the mind in adversity. They also have a strong sense that it is up to them to bring China back or restore to China its former glory and its status in the world. And that is enunciated in Xi Jinping's China's dream. It's not a dream like we talk about an American dream or an Indian dream where you have a house and you have food and you have a car. No, it's a muscular dream, and that's something we need to take note of. He talks of wiping out past humiliations. In other words, the old treaties, etc., because they were unequal treaties. He talks about putting wealth into the people's pockets, very understandable and laudable, I would say. And he talks about a strong, rejuvenated China, a strong China. It's a very muscular kind of assertive dream that he has put forward, and which is fast becoming the kind of guiding principle for China. And the fact that it has been endorsed by the party was evident from the manner in which, within a month of the 18th Party Congress, very senior party cadres fanned out across the globe and went to important capitals where they came to Delhi too. They came to Delhi, they went to London, they went to Washington to explain the China dream. And this is the explanation that they offered, which I just mentioned. This has a direct correlation to this leadership's view on borders, on sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are seeing it in play as far as the South China Sea issues are concerned. We are seeing the manner in which they are dealing with Japan, the manner in which they are dealing with the Philippines and Vietnam, and how those three countries are dealing with China. But what comes out here is the assertiveness that China has displayed and the fact that it is adamant on securing its sovereignty over these waters. Of course, it is trying to avoid military confrontation as far as possible, but they are not backing off from pushing these countries very, very hard. As far as we are concerned, we have just seen it too, in two incidents which stand out among the many that have happened over the last year or two. That is recently in the Lepsang Plains incident and then in Arunachal Pradesh. In both these cases, the incursions came to public notice. They dominated our TV and our print media. And the Chinese, who obviously were getting daily reports, were not sensitive to Indian public opinion on this issue. They did not withdraw. There were very tough negotiations, and there was an embarrassment to the Indian government. What came through was that when it comes to questions of territorial integrity and sovereignty, these issues are irrelevant. The Chinese also made that very clear last August, when through the Chinese official news agency Xinhua, they declared on August, I think it was August 27th, that burgeoning economic ties, and this was addressed to the Philippines and Japan, just before Aquino's visit to Beijing, and when the new Japanese Prime Minister was in the saddle, that burgeoning economic ties do not translate into good bilateral relations. Here too, during the Lepsang incident, if you recall, their Premier Li Keqiang was supposed to come here. They didn't, resile or back off from the Lepsang incident. They went ahead. And at that time, what one heard being put out by officials in the Chinese embassy was that it was assessed and it was felt that the visit would not be scrubbed by us. In conclusion, let me just touch on Tibet, since that has also been that is also a part of the topic. Again, here the developments have a direct impact on us, and I'll just refer to two or three small things. One is the manner in which, since 2008, developments have begun unfolding in Tibet, and I think they have gained a fresh momentum. I won't go into details, but the Tibet Work Forum of 2010, I think, gave fillip to the developmental activity inside Tibet. There's a lot more projects were sanctioned, a lot of money was pumped in, and also bonuses were given around the same time to PLA troops to get them to serve in Tibet. And I'll come to that just a minute, in a minute. But as far as the defense or strategic infrastructure is concerned, they've completed 8 airfields, very modern, equipped with the latest facilities inside Tibet. And the Chinese Civil Aviation Administration of China has announced plans for 59 airfields in and around Tibet. So just think of the consequences. Border posts and border roads have been completed along the entire border. I say this with special reference to our chairman's comments about the Border Defense Cooperation Agreement and the pitfalls that potential pitfalls that it has. They've completed all this, and each one of their border posts is linked by road and linked by fiber optic communications with each other and with their air headquarters. They're also backed by modern airfields, not too much of a distance. Barracks and ammunition and food storage dumps have been built, anticipating the induction of additional troops in these areas. So provision has been made for all that. Then we come to the railway line that has been built from Xining to Lhasa, a tremendous feat which has been done, and they are now working on extending it to Shigatse. And they've virtually given a commitment to the Nepalese that they will build it from Shigatse to Kathmandu, And recently, I heard, I don't know how far it will get confirmed, but I heard that there is talk of bringing that railway line to Lumbini, and I heard it very recently. So if that comes, I think for us, it's a cause for very serious worry. We have an army chief with us, and I think he will bear me out that in Nepal, they do not have the manpower or the skills to build a railway. It will be built by Chinese labor, which will really speaking mean by PLA personnel, who will build the railway line and who will of course operate it. So I think that's cause for concern. Similarly, there is acute shortage of water in northern China. And the latest reports you would have all read is the shortage of rice in China, so they've become importing large amounts of rice. They're also anticipating a decline in food production by 2045, in which case the incentive to divert the rivers from the south to the north will increase, and I think the dams that we are seeing being constructed are already a sign of that. But in Tibet itself, what is happening? They've got a new Tibet party secretary, appointed at the behest, I understand, of Xi Jinping. So again, that's an indication of how he had started exercising authority even before taking over. And this gentleman has brought in a new style of operation. On the one hand, he is promoting economic development, which is his forte. He is bringing more business in. He's sanctioning more projects and developing the infrastructure in Lhasa and bigger cities of the Tibet Autonomous Region. On the other, he is increasing party surveillance across Tibet. So all villages, that over 5,900 odd villages in Tibet, now have a party representation, which they didn't. All monasteries have a party organization in them. And in fact, they've even gone to the extent of creating a bureaucratic structure whereby monks who are loyal and reliable are given pension, they're given a salary, and they're given promotions. So I guess it works everywhere. But that's what they're doing. They've set up a grid system which has over 690 police stations, ensuring that within 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm quoting the Tibet Party Secretary here, the response to any incident is within 3 to 5 minutes. That's the kind of coverage that they have sort of managed to secure. But in the midst of all this, we have a lot of frustration in Tibet. The number of self-immolations have reached, I think, 122 or so. They're continuing. They continue to venerate the Dalai Lama from Tibet. And really speaking, to my mind at least, the self-immolations signify one very important factor, which is that the protests, the epicenter of protests has shifted inside China and inside Tibet. It is no longer a movement or aspiration that is led from outside Tibet. I think it is now inside Tibet. And that means that there are 6 million Tibetans in China who at any time could get, you can say, either infected or inspired, depending on how you look at it. But the Chinese leadership is very worried. And here I must mention, because I did talk about the bonus being given to the PLA troops, etc. I must mention a document that came out recently, which was written by the People's Armed Police political department in October 2008. And I did refer to 2008 being a critical year. That was the year of the riots. And this document mentioned that the PLA and PAP troops deployed in the Tibetan plateau, that includes not only the Tibet Autonomous Region, but also Sichuan and Qinghai, are suffering severe psychological stress and problems because they apprehend, or they're in a state of fearing constant attack. They're in a state where they're unable to reconcile to shooting and killing people, things like that. And since then, the medical hospitals and institutes in China have begun sending delegations of psychologists to all these centers to treat personnel. This could have been one of the factors that prompted the thinking in the Chinese leadership to take a new initiative on Tibet. And here I conclude by just saying that for the Chinese leadership, Tibet has come to the top of their agenda. It's a domestic agenda, but it's also domestic plus international. And they're addressing it. And we've seen 2-3 things happening recently. One is a visit by a person called Xiaonan. He's a United Front Work Department gentleman, director level person, who came to Dharamsala very quietly from Nepal, met all the leading lights and went back. And he has been trying to impress upon people that he has a connection to Xi Jinping, and some fresh initiatives are in the offing on the Tibet issue. Of course, the soft sell is that this will appeal to the Tibetan people. But on the ground, as I just spelled out to you, things have not changed. The controls are extremely tight, and they will continue to be tight. The second thing was some comments made by a senior member of the Central Party School faculty, Chin Wei. She gave a very surprising interview to a magazine based in Hong Kong. And here I'll reveal a secret to you. The editor of that magazine and the person who took her interview is an accomplice or a friend or whatever you call it of Xiaonan's. So there is a connection there. She gave an interview where she said that the Chinese would like to resume talks with the Dalai Lama. They would like to invite the Dalai Lama to either Macau or Hong Kong or even to Beijing if it is confirmed that he has given up political activity. But the central point in her lengthy interview is that under any circumstances, they do not want a situation of 2 Dalai Lamas, like they have of 2 Panchen Lamas. So they said that we want at all costs to have the reincarnation inside China. So that's the final point. There has of course been a reaction, and Chu Wei-chun, who was a hardline Vice Minister of the United Front, responded. He said no question of relaxations, and Yu Chang-shan, the chairman of the CPPCC, whom I referred to earlier, repeated that and went to Tibet. And let me end by saying, in the context of our border, etc., that all the senior Chinese central leaders who visit Tibet go to Ningxia, which according to Chinese maps, Ningxia includes Arunachal Pradesh. Thank you very much.